علما. Inshallah, tonight we will start from where we left off last week in the explanation of the verses of surah Bakarah. We're on verse number 265, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about those who spend in His way with the right intention. Last week we spoke about the verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the people who spend their wealth in sadaqah and in charity, but then because of the actions that they do after that, they cancel out the reward. So people who spend their wealth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a good action, but then they cancel that out by reminding the person that I helped you, I spent this amount of money upon you, or they harm the person, or they insult the person that they helped. So you did something good, but then you canceled it out by following it up with something bad. So last week we spoke about the people who spend their wealth in this way and then cancel out any reward that they may have earned. And we also spoke about those who spend their wealth not for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but to show off to the people or to be praised by the people. And we spoke about the analogy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives for these people. And we mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the situation of a rock that has some dust accumulated upon it. And then heavy rain comes onto that and washes all that dust on the rock away. So the sadaqah that you did, it's like the dirt or the dust that is accumulated on that rock. But then because of how you followed it up, either by reminding the people of your generosity, or by harming the person you were generous to, or by doing it with the wrong intention to show off, that sadaqah that you gave, it is washed away like the water of a heavy rain washes away the dirt from that stone and leaves it completely smooth. So basically it just cancels out the reward, right? So it's very important that when you give in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first of all, you give with the right intention for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondly, you do not follow up your charity with reminders of your generosity or with any type of harm to the one whom you gave charity to. So we spoke about that in detail last week. Now in this next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the people who spend their wealth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the correct way. They do it sincerely for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they do not follow it up with evil actions that will render it invalid. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in this verse, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. The likeness of those who spend their wealth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the pleasure of Allah. They do it for the pleasure of Allah. Now, that means their intention is correct. They're not doing it to show off to people. They're not doing it to be praised or recognized by the people. They're doing it for mardatillah, for the pleasure of Allah. So that means their intention is sound. وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. And they do it with certainty that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is true. They have this certainty in themselves that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for those who give in His way, that promise is true. And we spoke about the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the likeness of those who spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like a seed or a grain that grows into 7 ears, and each one of those ears has 100 grains. So it's like that one grain became 700, right? This is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are other verses, and there are a number of ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ which mention the virtue of charity and the reward of charity. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. The likeness of those who spend their wealth for the pleasure of Allah and with firm certainty in themselves that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for the people who give charity is true. They have this belief and this certainty, they're sure that if I give this in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the right intention, for sure I'm going to get this reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they have the right intention, and they're doing it for the right reasons, and they know that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is true. What is the likeness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala compares these people to? He says, كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٌ فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ فَإِن لَّمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌّ. That the likeness of these people is like the likeness of a garden that is on an elevated piece of land. And this garden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the word Jannah. There are many words for garden in Arabic. There's the word bustan, there's the word hadiqa, there is the word Jannah, right? A number of words that mean garden. And each one of them has a slight difference in meaning. So the ulama of al-lugha, the ulama of the language, they have said that a Jannah is a garden that must have date trees in it. If it doesn't have date trees, then it's not called a Jannah. It can be called a bustan, it can be called hadiqa, it can be, these other names can be used for it. But a garden that has date trees is known as a Jannah, right? So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is likening the people who spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the right intention and with certainty in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is like a garden, a Jannah, a garden that has date trees and other fruits as well, on an elevated place. And a heavy rain, the word wabil, فَأَصَابَهَا wabil. This garden, this Jannah, a heavy rain comes to it. And when this heavy rain comes to the garden, it causes lots of fruits to grow, more than normal, because too much water. Lots of water came, so the harvest became more. فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ. So the amount of fruits that came out of the garden, it's doubled than what it usually would be because of the heavy rain. فَإِن لَّمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌّ. And if a heavy rain doesn't come to it, then a light, continuous rain comes to it. So a heavy rain one time, or two times, or a few times in the year, that has the effect of causing more fruits to grow. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a heavy rain just a few times in the year. If it's a constant rain that comes all the time, even if it's light, a light rain but constant, then it will also have the same effect as well. So either a heavy rain that comes once or a few times a year, or a light rain that constantly comes throughout the year. Both of these will have the same effect. So anyone who spends big amounts in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from time to time, they will get a great reward. Anyone who spends even small amounts in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but on a regular, consistent basis, then they will have a great reward as well. Both ways are fine. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likens those people who spend in His way with the right intention for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to this garden that gets rain, and the harvest and the fruits that come to that garden are doubled. Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. And surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees everything that you do. Now in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives another analogy for the people who spend their money in sadaqah, in charity, but they do it for the wrong reason. They do it with the wrong intention, or they do it and then they follow it up with something that cancels it out. This is a very powerful analogy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in the next verse. He says, أَيَوَدُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن تَكُونَ لَهُ جَنَّةٌ مِّن نَخِيلٍ وَأَعْنَابٍ تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ له فيها من كل الثمرات وأصابه الكبر وله ذرية ضعفاء فأصابها إعصار فيه نار فاحترقت كذلك يبين الله لكم الآيات لعلكم تتفكرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives the example of a person who has a Jannah. Again, a Jannah means a garden that has date trees. أَيَوَدُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن تَكُونَ لَهُ جَنَّةٌ مِّن نَخِيلٍ وَأَعْنَابٍ. Would one of you love to have a garden that has date trees and grapevines and rivers flow beneath in this garden, meaning it has a water supply of rivers, and it has all sorts of fruits in this garden? Lahu fiha min kulli thamarat. This garden, it has date trees and it has grapevines and it has all other types of fruits as well, and it has a water supply of rivers coming into it, right? A beautiful garden. But then the owner of this garden, eventually, he has this garden, this beautiful garden with all of these fruits, but eventually the owner of this garden, he becomes old. وَأَصَابَهُ الْكِبَرُ. The owner of this garden, he becomes old. وَلَهُ ذُرِّيَّةٌ ضُعَفَاء. And he has weak children. And he has children who are still young, and they're not able really to do anything. They're weak, they're not able to help him in the garden, and he himself has also become old, so he's not able to do much anymore either. So he has this beautiful garden that he has had over the years, but now he's really not able to take care of it anymore, and his children, because of their youth, because of their weakness, they're not able to take care of it either. So then what happens? فَأَصَابَهَا إِعْصَارٌ فِيهِ نَارٌ. That a whirlwind or a tornado comes into that garden, and it's not just wind, but it is a whirlwind that has fire in it. So imagine like a fire tornado. فَأَصَابَهَا إِعْصَارٌ فِيهِ نَارٌ فَاحْتَرَقَتْ. So this fire whirlwind, it comes into the garden and it burns everything down. Right? So this is the likeness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives for those people who spend in charity, meaning they have this beautiful garden. The garden, it represents the charity that they have spent. But then the tornado with the fire, that represents the actions that they did to cancel out the reward that they would have gotten. They reminded the people of their generosity. They harmed the people that they were generous to. They showed arrogance to the people that they gave to. So they did all of this good stuff, but then like the fire tornado destroyed the garden, these people, they destroyed the fruits of their sadaqah with their actions. So this is a very powerful illustration, analogy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives for the people who spend their wealth in charity, but then they cancel it out with evil actions afterwards. So this is something that you can actually visualize, right? So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ آيَاتِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes clear to you His signs so that you may think. Think about this. And if you think about it and you reflect upon this, you will make sure that when you give charity, you do it in the right way. You'll make sure that when you give charity, you don't want to destroy the reward of this charity. The reward is great. You don't want to do anything to jeopardize that reward. So if you think about this, you will not destroy the rewards of your charity like the fire tornado destroys the garden. You don't want to do that. So you'll make sure that when you spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your intention is good. You're doing it for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you will then make sure that you do not follow up your charity with actions that will cancel it out. You will not constantly remind the person. You will not remind the person at all that I helped you, I did this for you. You should treat me better now. You should respect me more now because I'm the one who helped you out. No, never do this type of thing. Right? Rather, it's a favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, that He gave you the ability to help this person out. So don't hold that over the person that you helped. Right? So don't remind the people of your generosity, because you're seeking the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're really sincere and you're seeking the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why are you going to remind the people that you helped out? Why do you want recognition from them? No, you want recognition and reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So a person who reflects upon this, they're going to make sure they don't do anything that's going to destroy that reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't follow up your charity with reminders of your generosity. Don't follow up your charity with anything that will harm others. Don't insult the people that you helped. Don't be arrogant over the people that you helped, right? And have the right intention and the purity of intention that this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and I have firm certainty that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is true, and He will give me the reward for this charity. So these are a few verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about charity, the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from the people who give charity in the right way. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the reward for that charity. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from the people who always have the right intention when we give in His way. Ameen. Inshallah, we'll stop there for today, and next week, bi'idhnillah, we will continue with the next few verses, bi'idhnillah. Barakallahu feekum. Wallahu a'lam. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.